Do you believe in demons, or maybe wonder if there really is something evil out there? Then this video is for you. Welcome to the channel, everyone. My name's Spola, and here on Deep Mind Squared, we talk all things magical practices and altered states. And in today's video, I felt it was important to talk a bit about a topic that has been coming up more and more in my world recently. This kind of stemmed from some curiosities around Goetia, which is a form of like demon magic or demonolatry. And I started having more and more conversations, but also hearing from people close to me how demons have been kind of showing up in some form or another in their life. So it seems fitting to have this conversation with you today, and just from doing some listening and reading, I feel like there are a few different aspects or different viewpoints around what demons are, and I hope to share that with you here today. So of course, everything on our channel here is meant to empower you and support you in finding your own truth. So do what you will with what I have to share today, and if you have any other viewpoints or if there's something that you feel you'd like to add, you can do so in the comments below. Before we start, I want to invite you to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you're updated about future video releases. We have weekly live videos, energy healings, and intuitive guidance, as well as informative videos on different magical practices and altered state topics. So growing up in a very Christian home, the concept of evil versus good, demons versus angels was very much a part of my life experience. When I was in grade 4, I ended up kind of being involved in some magical happenings just because of my own inner curiosities. And all of this happened in a Catholic school, which they didn't really like. And that kind of opened the door, I guess, for me around, really looking at how people perceive good versus evil. At that time, my family was very much involved in more Pentecostal and also Baptist sort of background or denomination. And so there was a lot around praying in tongues, the idea of damnation and hell and all sorts of things like that. So this is kind of the landscape, I guess, in which I have been raised, and where I've been trying to really undo programming that really just induces a lot of fear. So coming from a very Christian background, I can see how things were very much dualistic, like good and wrong or whatever the case might be. So it's easy then for me to want to look at demons as these sort of entities or beings that exist. I grew up experiencing deep possessions, and what I've kind of bridged from, witnessing or hearing stories from as a child about those sorts of experiences to now working with folks who are going through that, it is enlightening, I guess, to kind of see maybe this alternative view. So what exactly is a demon? So the word demon comes from the Greek word daimon, which means a deity, a lesser god, a guiding spirit. And in ancient Greece, you were granted a daemon as a spirit guide, and these beings shared knowledge, they supported people, and really were part of, supporting someone and kind of guiding them on their path of life, their fate. There was less focus on the moral aspects of right or wrong. And as time and history progressed on through various different eras, like the Hellenistic Greek period, there started to become more of a polarity or division of a good demon versus a not so good demon. And I would like to think that a lot of this really started to escalate once we got into the Dark Ages, and this is where a lot of the different magicians and occult practices, where we have the Lesser Key of Solomon, that form of ritual magic was really about working with these demons, which started to become known more as these entities outside of oneself that needed to be controlled, manipulated in some form, and held to carry out one's will. And so very much in the state of, I would say, fear, in a way of needing to create protection and needing to ensure that the being is there and that you can control and master, as King Solomon did to build the temple. And I'll add a little note here, is this is kind of, I think, where a lot of my curiosity started to stem, was thinking and reading a bit more about King Solomon from the Old Testament. Basically what was going on for King Solomon was that he was asked by God, hey, what would you like if you could have anything in this world? What would it be? And of course, King Solomon, in his, I guess, humility, was like, I know nothing. I am but a child, and I wish to have wisdom. And with that, instead of him, seeking out fame and wealth and all this stuff, God was like, okay, I will give you wisdom. And God, allowed Solomon and gave him the knowledge of working with nature, the birds, with these daimons, or the jinn in different religious texts as they're known, which is also what a genie is. And so King Solomon was able to build the temple with these demons. And so for me, that was really interesting, is here is this man of God in some form who was given the knowledge and the wisdom to work with these beings. And it had me just wonder, like, okay, so if King Solomon was allowed and granted that in a way, like given that wisdom by God, then what is so wrong with working with these beings? And this is kind of where we have these different concepts of what a daemon, what a demon is. Now, there are some schools of thought, and we can see it from the actual meaning of the word, that these are like old gods. And many people say that these were the gods or the beings and deities that were looked at in high regard from many, many millennia ago, that had then been converted into this sort of class of system of entities. And that they were considered in a place to be like not as high on the hierarchical scale as the monotheistic God or the angels and so forth. Ancestors across time worked with a lot of these beings that were then transformed into what we would then see as like evil, wrong beings. And I don't really know if that's necessarily fair. We can see how that has happened across time with different like spiritual or religious groups, including like the Norse pantheon, even for myself being part Norwegian, Scottish being part Nigerian. I see it in the Yoruba tradition and how Christianity took those gods or deities and kind of like made them seem not good. But also many people coming from those religious groups started to transfer what they knew those gods to be into, different aspects of the Catholic or Christian faith. So if these are the old gods, if these are beings, that have come really from the earth, is how I perceive it, I think this kind of aligns with what Lon Milo Duquette talks about, who is an occult writer, has a lot of like really interesting books and talks you can check out. And it's about like this kind of lower aspect of magic. But I really like the concept of demons as actual aspects of like one's psyche. And this is where I think there's a lot of debate on the topic of, okay, are demons actual entities or are they just aspects of ourselves? In my personal experience working with different entities, angels, beings, whatever, like God knows like the things that I have been able to explore in my life, I would say that each of these aspects are like a representation of my consciousness, whether it's like a shadow part, those parts that we like put underneath, we don't really want to look at, or they are also part of like then something in the external world. It's really a matter of one coming to terms with what that looks like. I do think that there is no like real distinction between those two. And, some of the questions then that I kind of ponder is, okay, well, if it's, these demons are just part of our consciousness, and, if you work with a demon in particular, that means it's going to open up some gateway to that particular kind of theme in your life. And then you're going to have to, move through the personal development work or the healing stuff around that. Like, okay, if that's there, then how come some folks are possessed or show different symptoms, I guess we could say, of possession or a demon or an entity kind of being around them? And I will say that I have encountered that with folks. I wouldn't necessarily call every instant like a demon. I would for sure say that has happened on occasion where I have encountered such a dark energy with someone that it's like, wow, like that person's not really human. There is something else there. But even in those cases, I wouldn't really even identify it as this like other entity that is there. And I think this is where with Christianity there are some challenges that we are meant to like move through. You know, it's kind of leaving us in this place of victimization, okay, where someone wants to project all of their issues onto a scapegoat, which I find funny because like Satan, goated horned being, scapegoat, you know, like of course we'd have a goat. Like we need to project our fears, project what our shadows are, the bad parts, the wrong parts onto something else. Otherwise, we have to acknowledge that that's just us. I think in those cases with like people who are really, really in like a state of maybe darkness, if I can call, and maybe some of their actions, their words are just not really in a place of compassion, it could be at that point like that entity or that demon did sort of like actually materialize because the shadow, that aspect of consciousness has become just so ingrained and so much there, like wanting to be seen. And until we actually acknowledge it, and this is a huge part of like compassion, compassionate depossession, is acknowledging a being that's there. It doesn't mean we have to like welcome it, give it tea, and be all happy and whatever with it. Like we still can set firm boundaries, but it's just seeing it, right? And recognizing it for what it is. Now, talking with some friends and other people, you know, having actually seen demons, who knows what that is? I've been reading a book about the Goetia, and it's really interesting to hear the perspective of how these beings like materialize through evocation. You know, if you've ever experienced seeing anything like that, it can be scary. You know, for myself, how I perceive energy when I see something, like I have like seen things, but I know it's also like a projection or me kind of picking up on the energies. And what I find usually tied to it is a lot of fear. And that's how these beings kind of operate, right? It's like the fear can feed that energy of the shadow or that part of the consciousness. And we know our minds are powerful like beings or aspects of ourselves, and we can create more story and dig ourselves deeper into a hole of fear. So recognizing what we need to do to protect our energy, to support ourselves with, you know, really being in our power. And there's so many different tools to do that. The lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, you can check out on the channel here. There's a bit of a walkthrough on that. You could do like house cleansing, making sure that you yourself are doing like regular healing work or energy medicine, meditating, prayer, and there are some really powerful prayers. I do believe that like with Christian prayer, you know, there's certain kind of like egregoric energies that have been used around certain prayers to support. And so it's okay to turn to those, whether you're a Christian or not, I think. I know for myself, there was one time I had an experience with sleep paralysis, which was like the most intense sleep paralysis, I would say, the most vivid like imagery as well. And it felt as though I was like being pulled through hell, and that there were like these demons. And I just remember like trying to, you know, get up out of bed because I'm partly like awake, partly asleep, or God knows what's going on. And I didn't really know what to say or what to do. And I started just praying and like speaking about like Jesus. And that just shifted the energy significantly for me. Some of you might be wondering, okay, well then if like using like Jesus in a prayer helped, then maybe you need to be mindful and like Christianity is the true path and all of that stuff. That's fair enough. And I had another experience once, and it wasn't necessarily with a demon, but it was with an angel of omnipotence. I think I said that correctly, omnipotence. That was one that really like woke me up to the power of God, the energy of like the universal being, whatever, that like nothingness that exists. And this was me being in bed, sleeping, or partly like awake again. It's funny how the in-between sleep and awake time can really shift energy and put us in a altered state of consciousness. I just remember this being kind of like crawling up on the bed. And it's like I could see it, but I couldn't see it. And I was in this kind of sort of bubble underneath the blanket, which I don't even know if my head was actually under the blanket at the time. And I felt this fear. This being was like just kind of hovering over me, and I'm like, okay, I need to like create a sense of protection here. And so I started to think about, just saying a prayer. And I started saying this prayer, like, okay, Jesus, like, can you protect and do the things? And this being like didn't budge. I'm like, okay, the next thing. Started to imagine like energy, like just a bright light, like Reiki sort of just emanating, creating a bubble. And that also didn't work. So then I was like, oh my gosh, like, what am I going to do here? It wasn't like the energy was getting more intense towards harming me, but I definitely felt a bit more of this like desperation of like, what? Like, what is it? And then I started to repeat like just the tetragrammaton, Yod He Vav He. And I repeated that like God name. And as soon as I started to do that, this being just like basically was like, yeah, okay, you got it. And like it was like teaching me a lesson. It was really bizarre, and it just left. And so that was really like a huge learning for me is, okay, forget all the other things that we know. Ultimately, it all returns back to God. It returns to that like main source of creation of the universe. And all of these beings, demons, angels, there are hierarchies. I like it, I think it was in Israel Regardie's book, The Tree of Life. He's talking about how on the Tree of Life, these beings are in hierarchical order. We have different angels at different levels or sephira of the tree. And it's like the demons are like the lower beings. They are with us in this earthly like plane, and it's because of that they kind of vibrate at the same level as us, and so they can attach more to us in a way, like they're more present in our reality. And I wondered then from reading this is, okay, if that's the case, and he talks about them, like about humans being able to transcend the tree of life through like path working and expanding our consciousness to return to God. Right, we've come from God, and now our hope is to like kind of return, to move our state of consciousness back into that higher realm. And it made me think that perhaps then these demons, they too desire to return to God. And we have the concept of the fallen angels. The demons all apparently came from heaven, and when the battle and everything with Lucifer happened, those all kind of fell to the earthly plane. And so it was like, okay, people oftentimes work with demons. They want to maintain some sense of power, or they want to come to new understandings about themselves, or gain some material wealth, or whatever it might be. And that can be, one way in which one can work. And the demons then attach because they are able to use us kind of as like vessels or vehicles to get to God, which isn't like really ideal. I think we kind of want to keep our energy like to ourselves. But it's like, what if that's also kind of a service? And the main thing to know is that, I guess, when we are asking or working with a demon or doing this type of work, there is that like chance that attachment, it's going both ways, right? The demon is giving you something or working for you in some capacity, but there's also an attachment to you. And what is that like going to cost you? And that can be a really hard part, I think. It's something I was telling one friend, like, maybe Goetic magic and working with demons or whatever is an okay path. For some, it works really well. And for others, it's probably nothing that you ever would want to touch. And that's okay. Everyone has their own, interests and focus, but there is a lot more, I would personally think, with working with these lower entities that we need to be aware of, to be conscious of. Some of that shadow work, I know for me, shadow work has been the most transformative, but also like the most intense way of exploring my consciousness, my psyche, and it's not always easy. And so those things I'll just share with you, just leave it as is. I'd love to hear your comments about where you sit around demons, if you had any experiences with demons that you feel called to share with the community. And of course, no judgment, right? This is our personal journey. Everyone's got to come to an understanding in their own way. And what I'm really learning is that I have a belief internal, like my intuition is telling me what is my truth and what aligns based on my life experience. And it doesn't always align with everyone else's, including close friends, and that's okay. We can still be connected and know that our personal beliefs don't have to interfere with each other's. So yeah, just speaking that here in the space. But I appreciate you joining here, and until next time, I'll see you in another video.